I want to just start by saying something quickly about what AJC is doing in the space of higher education. And just to contextualize that obviously this is a panel that's talking very much about the US context, and we realize this is a very international group, and we're not really addressing context beyond the United States in this panel. But we hope that the innovations and the research and the content that we're giving in this panel can be extrapolated in certain ways, obviously not others, to other contexts. The Center for Education Advocacy at AJC was founded in the wake of October 7th. And we work in education spaces in K through 12 schools, kindergarten through 12th grade, higher education, parents and Jewish students in high school and college to create atmospheres that are resilient against anti-Semitism in all forms. That means a whole lot of things. I won't get into all of them here. But one of the great areas, enormous areas that we work on is higher education policy. And that's what I'm going to be mostly focusing on today. I also wanted to add to the sort of definitions of anti-Semitism because this one, for me, is so resonant to what's going on campus in the United States. This is a quote from Dara Horn, who wrote specifically about Harvard. She's an alum, and she was writing about what's going on Harvard's campus in February 2024. Just to situate all of us, this is when the encampments were beginning and growing. Anti-Semitism as a righteous act of resistance against evil, because Jews are collectively evil and have no right to exist, is an idea that's really, really important. And at its worst, the most egregious things that went on campus, very much this is a through line for them. So I want to talk a little bit about lens data and the data of the Brandeis University Cohen Center. And it's been very, very helpful to us as we try to create innovations, policy innovations that are targeted and useful and data-driven. And I want to contextualize them just by mentioning 6 pieces of context that we have found are very, very important as we think about what's going on campus. And some of them Len has already mentioned. First of all, obviously, we live in a society with increased polarization, and there's some data to indicate that our younger generations are even more polarized than their elders. Len also mentioned sort of a hyper-focus on Israel in social media. I would argue that it's beyond also social media. It is also in the press. We know that there is an inordinate number of journalists who are assigned to cover Israel. That may have to do with the fact that Israel is important to sort of the Western imagination. It's the home of the 3 monotheistic religions. It is sort of part of this Judeo-Christian, a phrase I hate and won't use, but I'm putting it in quotes, Judeo-Christian values. It is the US's staunch ally in the Middle East, the last few weeks notwithstanding. That's a very important piece of this. And as Len pointed out, a huge lack of understanding and knowledge about Israel and the Middle East in general. I think, and Len, I want to know if you agree with me, that Israel and the Middle East, or the Israel-Hamas war, is kind of the #1 international issue that students are concerned with on campus, even as it is not very important in the list of other issues that they're concerned with. But there's an enormous lack of understanding, and I'm thinking about that UC Berkeley professor Ron Hassner's little study that he did in 2024. No, it was in December 2023, about the chant from the river to the sea, where he found that 86% of the students surveyed supported the chant, 33% enthusiastically, but only 47%, so under half, could correctly label which river and which sea. At least one student said the Caribbean Sea. Yeah, that's where we are, folks. K through 12 schools do not teach about Israel and its relationship with the Arab states in the Middle East. They don't teach about the Middle East in general. That's due to many, many factors, one of which is they don't have time. But another factor is, and we deal with K through 12 schools all the time, they're terrified to teach about it because they know that whatever they say, they're going to make somebody angry, and so they just opt out entirely. Another issue, the turn toward activist classrooms, and this is something that we see a great deal in the K through 12, particularly the public school space, where there's an ideology of activism, an ideology of the classroom being utilized as a place to advance social justice causes, which theoretically could sound wonderful, but can be incredibly problematic when the social justice being advanced is polarizing and not shared by all members of society. And through a lens of intersectionality, the Palestinian cause is seen as sort of the center, and they even have graphics of this in the K through 12 space, is seen as being the center of all the roots of evil in society. Eroding critical thinking skills, ability of students of K through 12 and of higher ed to have the critical thinking skills that they should, probably due to a number of different causes, including COVID, including social media, including AI. Those are key to students being able to evaluate critical claims about other groups and issues of social concern. Students being willing to chant from the river to the sea when they don't know what river and what sea is a perfect example of not having good critical thinking skills. And weakening social networks, which Len also mentioned. We know that social networks in our society have been weakening for a long time. Bowling Alone, the book, was written in the year 2000, which is a long time ago. And obviously it's only gotten worse with COVID and now AI, where people are making friends with bots rather than with other human beings. When we spoke to presidents in the end of 2024, the academic year 2024, which was the year with all the encampments, et cetera, so many of them said, we can't wait till the class of 2024 graduates. We need them off our campus. Why? Because those are the students that started in COVID. Those are the students that spent their first year completely alienated, not able to have friends. Is it any wonder that they turned to encampments, even if they didn't really know that much about what was going on? They need some place to belong. So what else do we need to know? The Brandeis research that Len spoke about is very important because it situates anti-Semitism and Jewish perspectives of it in a much larger picture that includes a wide range of ethnic and religious groups on campus. And it does two things. This affords university administrators the ability to see anti-Semitism in a larger context of the need to knit campus together across lines of difference. And that can help remove responses, which we hear frequently. I can't just deal with the Jews, which they can't. And there are also other groups that need help. It also gives a window into the ways in which discriminatory attitudes can overlap and differ, and that allows for greater understanding of campus student life. It allows administrators to see how each group of students sees their issues and sees others. That's critical in the development of programs that are going to seed pluralism, that are going to seed dialogue across difference. It helps them address the needs and perspectives of different students. And at the same time, there are other issues that administrators need to understand in order to meet this moment with student life programming and policies. So the first is the connection between anti-Semitism and anti-democratic trends in society, and Len alluded to this as well. Higher ed leaders, like the majority of Americans, are concerned about the anti-liberal tendencies, anti-democratic trends in our society. And we know that those trends have a real overlap with anti-Semitism. Polarization and conspiracy theories arise deeply in societies that are fraying in terms of democracy. So that's another really critical avenue in helping administrators adopt the policies we want. We're all concerned with democracy in the Western world. And those interventions that highlight pluralism, constructive disagreement, et cetera, help solve for this sort of turn toward anti-democratic values as well as for anti-Semitism. We need to know the impact of K through 12 education. A number of presidents in the spring of 2024 said to me, I can't solve it when they come to campus at 18. And they're right. Students come to campus not as blank slates. They arrive being formed as students and as people. They're not full-fledged adults yet, but they're well on their way. And we know that the education that they're getting and not getting in K through 12 spaces is truly influences the way they come to campus. And lastly, and we're hoping Brandeis, and we know that Brandeis is going to be engaging in some of this research in the near future. What are the interventions that are actually working in cultivating campus cultures of belonging? So these are areas of really fruitful further research that needs to take place. So I'm going to talk in a minute specifically about student life, but I want to just give you a frame about how we at AJC are thinking about issues of anti-Semitism on campus. We've kind of created 3 buckets of work that we're doing. Bucket number one, which I haven't represented here but encompasses the whole thing, is leadership. Presidential leadership, leadership of vice presidents for student life, of provosts, how they can sort of find a voice and find a path forward, and also to be able to see beyond the burning fires of the moment into the future that they want to bring about. In addition to the leadership piece, we have these two buckets of intellectual culture, which I'm actually not going to talk a lot about here today because we're really focusing on students, and of student life. Intellectual culture, faculty, courses, course descriptions, research, academic societies, et cetera, which we know has been an issue. But I'm going to focus here on student life and on the research that Brandeis did. The overall challenges that we face in terms of thinking about interventions in the student life space, and also overall in our work on campus, I think there's an oversimplified binary, because we're polarized, of the Trump administration versus higher education. And we have to be able to find a gray zone in there. AJC entered into what I think about as being an incredibly historic statement with the AAU and ACE, two higher ed, very important higher ed umbrella organizations in the United States. We entered into it in May of 2025. And in that statement, AJC said that some of the actions of the Trump administration were detrimental and damaging to higher ed. And AAU and ACE, which between the two of them represent something like 2,600 institutions of higher education across the United States, said that anti-Semitism is a real problem that needs consequential reform and transparent action. So yes, there is anti-Semitism on campus. Yes, the administration's actions have had overreach and have been problematic. And conversely, no, not everything is anti-Semitism, and no, not everything Trump has done is wrong. So we have to be able to get rid of that binary. At the same time, there's also baked in anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism with a lot of our interlocutors on campus. It's hard to make the case, particularly with mid-level administrators, about what needs to happen on campus. You could have, for example, a very committed president that we talk to who's ready to make change, but mid-level administrators have to carry the burden of doing the work and carrying out the work. I'll tell you two quick stories about one very large Midwestern campus that is important to the Jews. I won't say which campus, but you might know. Where an administrator told our director of academic affairs at AJC, well, the Jews are really doing fine on our campus. They were not doing fine. The Jews are doing fine on our campus, but maybe your organization could donate money to help the students who are really in trouble. Another incident that happened on that same campus, which had a president who was very, very eager to work with us, the president showed his senior management team, his senior academic leadership team, wanted to show them a video that we had created of student voices after October 7th. And one administrator in the room did the following when he put the video up on the screen. Yeah, turned around and crossed his arms and refused to watch it. So we have that problem. And at the same time, also, as Len alluded to, and I said earlier, there's a concern about there's too much focus on Jews and anti-Semitism when there's a multitude of problems on campus. Anti-Semitism is one of many, many problems that administrators are facing in this moment. It really is actually an important thing to remember. They're still dealing with the outcome of COVID. They're dealing with the waning respect that America has for higher ed. They're dealing with real threats from the Trump administration against their research dollars. They're dealing with aging infrastructure, fewer male students, lower enrollment. They've got a lot of problems. This is our number one problem, but it's not theirs necessarily. Okay, so what do we suggest as the interventions? What are the policy interventions that we need in this moment? I want to divide them into three buckets: policy, education, and culture. And I've divided them very particularly this way because all three of them need to be addressed, and they're actually different, and I think we often conflate them. In the policy bucket, we need to understand, and universities need to understand, what are the rules, how are the rules being communicated, and what are the consequences for breaking rules. In 2024, in the spring, when the encampments took place, there was a sudden realization among many, many presidents and deans and vice presidents for student life that the codes of conduct hadn't been updated since the 1980s, and they didn't know what they said, and they never communicated them. So it was kind of expected almost, you know, it was their own unforced error that campuses devolved into chaos. They updated their policies, they put in consequences, and what do you know? The campus has calmed down. Effective reporting mechanisms. We know that universities have improved their reporting mechanisms, but we also know at the same time that they are not always effective. They aren't always clear to students. They aren't always responded to in a consistent manner. And lastly, Title VI coordinators. We have found a number of universities have now adopted Title VI. So Title VI is that civil rights law that covers the Jews through a shared national origin that Len mentioned. No, Sagit mentioned. We found a number of campuses have now hired specific Title VI coordinators or have expanded the role of Title IX coordinators, which is sex discrimination, to include Title VI, which is very, very important as well. In terms of education, education about Jewish identity and anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism is incredibly important, and it cannot be conflated with policy. Meaning, what we sometimes try to do is we go onto campus and we do a training. I hate that word, it sounds like monkeys. But we're gonna do a training that's gonna talk about Title VI and all the things that need to be done, and we're also gonna throw in there Jewish identity and anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism. The problem there is that those kinds of programs often don't work. We know this from DEI. Lots and lots of research about DEI. People need to be told that what they can and cannot do, what's illegal, what they need to do to stay ahead of all kinds of rule breaking and chaos on campus. And that may be a click-through training. But seeding empathy for a group is a very, very different kind of a project, and we have not nailed how to do that. And when I say we, I don't mean just the Jewish community, I mean no one has nailed well how to do that kind of a project. We need to work on that. And lastly, culture. And when I say culture, I don't mean specifically culture with respect to Jews, although they get subsumed under this tent. We need to understand how we're going to seed pluralism and productive disagreement on campus, and those are two different things. Productive disagreement is what could take place in a classroom, it could take place in a dorm at night, but that's how people are arguing with each other. What about when they're just living with one another? And the examples of the kinds of things that we saw after October 7th and are still going on today, the you can't be in my jazz dance troupe because you are a Zionist, happened to one of my husband's students who is at Columbia. My husband is a day school administrator in New York City. Those kinds of things happen all the time. So that's the kind of pluralism argument. How are we going to seed pluralism on our campuses where there is empathy, where there is curiosity, where there is humility, and not just only how to engage in productive disagreement. So what are the challenges in each of those buckets? So with respect to policy, one of the challenges that we see very often is the model of shared governance that occurs on campus. And shared governance is that we don't only have, universities are not run like companies. They're not corporations. The president does not dictate the policy for the university. There's shared governance between administrators and between faculty, and there's a reason for that, and it's important. And at the same time, we often find that some of the loudest voices on faculty and the ones who are the most active in faculty governance tend to be humanities faculty who may be extremely anti-Israel and even and anti-Semitic. And free speech concerns, which is of course very, very central in the United States, extremely, extremely important, and has to be valued and has to be honored, and at the same time can sometimes be used as sort of a straw man. Education, I mentioned ineffective presentations. We have to figure out how to do those better, and we do have research from the DEI, from the DEI moment that we had in the late 20-teens and early 2020s. Resistant learners, how are we supposed to teach this guy? Right, he's not gonna learn easily. And of course, there's time constraints. Other groups face discrimination. There are other issues on campus. In terms of culture, there are a lot of challenges even in defining pluralism, never mind embedding them. This is a real challenge, and many, many universities are engaging in very innovative programming right now to embed pluralism. Again, nobody's nailed it yet, but they're trying to figure out what that solution is. There's a fear of speaking up. How are you supposed to seed pluralism when people are hiding their identities, shrinking their identities, afraid to say anything controversial for fear of retribution? And of course, repeating the same mistakes of prior interventions. We cannot make the same mistakes that the DEI community made in terms of seeding resentment rather than engagement, rather than cultural improvement. And also we know that many of the DEI innovations actually didn't move the needle at all. And if you're interested in looking at, was a great article that the New York Times did about University of Michigan's DEI initiatives and how they ended up not actually doing anything, not really accomplishing anything. Okay, just about done. So what are the solutions? It will not surprise you, given Len's research and given what I've said here, that the number one solution is that we have to link our interventions to the good of the whole. We have to link it, we have to be able to talk about the interventions that are going to solve or help improve anti-Semitism, will also help solve and improve other elements of problems on campus. For example, or not just campus, beyond campus. For example, issues of democracy, issues of fraying of democracy, democratic values and civic values. And also the health of the higher education sector. Those in the United States probably know, but maybe beyond the United States are not aware, that Yale University just did a study to understand why universities have dipped so low in terms of the esteem and respect of the American population. And believe you me, presidents are worried about this. Universities are worried about this. They're worried about the fact that their respectableness has declined so substantially. And the innovations that we're talking about will help raise the esteem of the university. Thirdly, a rising tide lifts all ships. The data that Len has done, the study that Len has done, helps us see that there's a lot of beleaguered folks on campus, and there's a lot of discrimination on campus. And when we create good innovations regarding pluralism, regarding culture on campus, regarding productive disagreement, we're going to actually lift everyone's experience, not solely the Jewish experience. Collaborate with the citizens of campus. One of the things that we are very, very keen on doing at AJC is not going in with a set of recommendations saying, here, university, American Jewish Committee wants you to do this. But rather, the work that we are doing is actually working in long-term trusted relationships, which is what AJC is sort of known for, and having the universities work with each other and with us in small working groups to create the policies that will solve for the problems we're seeing on campus. This does a lot. This creates immediate buy-in. It creates solutions that actually resonate for administrators on campus. And it will also, when we release them, which we will at some point in the next year, I hope, will also be influential on a wider range of campuses. Cultivate organizational partners. It's hard to figure out who the organizational partners should be, but we cannot go into campus to talk about pluralism, to talk about culture, and only come in as an organization, a Jewish organization. We have to be able to enlist other partners in our work and to be able to go in and talk about the importance of creating pluralistic campuses with empathetic cultures beyond ourselves. And of course, engaging in continued research about the questions that I spoke about before is absolutely critical. AJC has created this sort of framework that we're moving forward and working on very, very closely with campuses on. And what we currently have as an outcome of our work with administrators is an action plan for higher ed administrators. I did not do the QR code like everybody else did, I should have. But if you go to ajc.org/CEA, Center for Education Advocacy, you'll find all of our resources for higher ed and K through 12 schools, all of which have been created in close cooperation with our trusted partners in education spaces. So our higher ed action plan has short, medium, and long-term strategies for creating the campuses that we want to see, the campuses I'm describing here. We also have our K through 12 public schools and our K through 12 independent schools, and guidance on all sorts of complicated issues that we've developed together with our partners. And we have found that because we develop it together with our partners, they reach a very high level of respect with those we're trying to influence. So we need more research. We need more time to see if current interventions are bearing fruit. We're not going to solve these problems overnight. These are problems that have been created over the process of decades, and we're not going to solve them overnight. But student turnover on campus is really, really rapid. Students are on campus for 4 years, maybe 5, in certain circumstances. And as we fix the pipeline, as we work in this K through 12 space, and hopefully try to develop some of those solutions leading up to campus, as well as working on the innovations and the campus structures that will see the kind of things that we need to see, we'll hopefully be able to create different student bodies on campus. Thank you.